parliamentary researcher arrested on suspicion of spying for China says he's completely innocent. The arrest under the Official Secrets Act led to the Prime Minister confronting Chinese Premier Li Qiang at the G20 summit in India yesterday. Well, I'm joined now by Benedict Rogers, who's the co-founder of Hong Kong Watch. Benedict, a lot of chagrin amongst parliamentarians saying they should have been told about this sooner. Of course, the parliamentary assistant is completely denying all of the allegations. Where are we at and what happens next?
Well, I think this is something that in many ways should come as no surprise, because we had just over a year ago a public warning from MI5 of Chinese influence and espionage. We had the case of Christine Lee, you'll recall. And earlier this summer, we had the Intelligence and Security Committee warning that China is carrying out a whole-of-state pervasive campaign against the UK. So the fact that China is trying to influence Westminster is no surprise. The alleged case, of course, relates to someone who's a British citizen, which is a shock. But what we should be doing next is looking at every way that we can strengthen parliamentary security, and particularly background checks or better background checks for parliamentary staff that are recruited for key committees where they may have access to classified information and to the ability to influence a wide range of MPs. And
Benedict, this scare comes off the back of warnings by Ken McCallum, head of MI5, who says that the Chinese Communist Party poses the most game-changing strategic challenge to the UK. Do you think that's a fair assumption?
Yes, I think that is a fair assumption. I mean, obviously, there are a variety of threats in the world from Putin's Russia and terrorism and other issues. But I would agree that China, through its widespread influence and intimidation campaign, and the sophistication and subtlety of some of its activities, is the most serious threat. And I say that as someone who, on a small scale, has experienced it firsthand. I mean, I've had direct threats from the Chinese Communist Party. I've been threatened with prison in Hong Kong. I was denied entry to Hong Kong. I've had anonymous threatening letters at my home in London. Even my mother has received letters telling her to tell her son to shut up. And thankfully, my mother has a good sense of humour and told me she'd given up doing that many years ago. But I mean, if they're targeting someone like me in that way, you can imagine the extent of their campaign to gain influence in Westminster.
OK, Benedict, China has been taking over much of the world in terms of soft power, in terms of resources, especially rare earth minerals needed for batteries, without a shot being fired. And they seem to be spying on us all the time in Britain via 5G masts, via TikTok, even cameras in electric cars. But the problem is this, isn't it? We won't do anything about it because we need all of the stuff from China. We can't have a diplomatic war with them. Back in the old days, we might have kicked out their ambassador or their embassy, but such a thing is very, very unlikely in this day and age, isn't it?
Well, that is exactly the problem. For far too many years, we were asleep at the wheel. We kowtowed to China. We had the so-called golden era under David Cameron. And at a time when we could have been diversifying our supply chains and our reliance on all the critical things that you've just mentioned, we were putting all our eggs in the basket of China. And that was a huge mistake. I think it is a huge challenge, but we must now act urgently to tackle the threats to our security, even if it means some economic cost to us. But in the long run, we should be strengthening relations with other parts of the world that can provide alternative sources for the critical materials that you've described.
OK, Benedict Rogers, co-founder of Hong Kong Watch. Thank you for that update.